Good evening. Welcome to the Pullman City Council meeting. This is a special meeting on a Monday night at 6 o'clock in which we're doing budget tonight, and it's nice to have you with us. With that, Mike Urban, please take a roll.
Mayor Johnson.
Present.
Councilmember Benjamin.
Present.
Councilmember Dubin.
Here.
Councilmember Guido. Councilmember McCall.
Here.
Councilmember Parks. Councilmember Weller.
Present.
Councilmember Wright.
Here.
And Parks notified us she could not be here tonight. Do I hear a motion to excuse?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, we have some community announcements tonight. That following Thursday's snow and Friday's rainfall and the windstorm and everything else, city officials have been busy on flood watch throughout the day. Luckily, circumstances failed to reach action level. We want to recognize the efforts of our first responders who never take a day off. They promptly and professionally responded to our numerous calls. That includes our maintenance and operations people, includes police, fire, and all kinds of crews that are out there working. We really appreciate it. City of Pullman Maintenance Department has begun the snow and ice prep. With the arrival of freezing temperatures, crews will continue de-icing protocols. They've already been out there several times. They're doing it again tonight. The department has also moved to winter staffing levels by adding morning and overnight shifts for increased response in winter weather events. Residential leaf collection has begun. We are very grateful for a windstorm. I've got a few more leaves off my tree, but that's still up there. Anyway, please rake loose leaves to the street. That is, unless they've already come by your house, which we had this morning. So still picking up on Sunnyside Hill. You can look at our website and you can find out when they're coming next to your hill. We are now accepting applications for Civil Service Commission, the newly formed Climate Resilience Commission. You can apply on the city website. Saturday, November 12th, area scouts will be visiting Pullman neighborhoods to collect food from your doorstep for the annual Scouting Food for campaign. This is your chance to increase our local food bank supply. So please leave bagged food at your doorstep by 9 o'clock in the morning on November 12th. And for more information, you can check with the scouts. Food for Pullman is running their second annual Thanksgiving meal giveaway and food drive on November 23rd between 1 and 5 p.m. at the Pullman Senior Center. That's on the first floor of the Pullman Rec Building. That's Building B. If you're in need, come by and pick up, no questions asked, for Thanksgiving meal kit. All food drive donations during the event will also receive free pizza, and donations go to the WSU Cougar Food Pantry to help students in need in our community. SJC Alliance, the consultant hired to help formulate the City of Pullman's Housing Action Plan, invites you to complete a 5-minute survey so you can provide your assessment and help highlight the true housing needs in our community. You can check the news section of our website with a link to the survey. And we've also changed our clocks, so the fire department reminds you to check your smoke detectors as well. I think years ago, we used to say change your battery when the time you change your clocks, but batteries last a lot longer than that, so at least test your smoke device. If it's not working, change your battery. Those are the announcements tonight. And with that, we now continue part 2 of our budget highlights. And with that, we have R.J. Lott, the Director of Community Development, dealing with planning, economic development, GIS, and protective inspections. So the floor is yours, R.J.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Pleased to provide a draft preliminary budget for the Community Development Department. It is on pages 53 to 63 of your budget. Community Development, relatively a new department. If you recall, it was created just about a year ago, last fall. It really is a labor-intensive department with most of the funds going towards salaries and benefits as well as the interfund rates, which you'll see here in a minute. New this year in the budget, which hasn't been utilized in previous years, the administrative costs for the administrative departments, which we share with Public Works, I should say administrative staff, has been dispersed a little bit differently than it has been in the past. So community development, to refresh your memory, consists of 4 divisions: planning, economic development, GIS, which is geographic information systems, and protective inspections, which does the building department. The red numbers are the funds that fund each of those divisions. So starting with planning, there is myself, the director, and 2 assistant planners. Previous years, we did have 1 assistant planner and 1 planning aides. So you may see some salaries in there that don't quite add up as we migrate. So the aide has been hired full-time about a year and a half ago and is now an assistant planner, as I mentioned. So as you can see, the salaries have increased year to year. The change of from 22 to 23 is about 15% of the total budget, and then just 3.8% as we go from 23 to 24. At the bottom of the screen, or the bottom of this page, you can see that there's no change in staffing levels. As I said, the community development director, myself, and then 2 assistant planners for a total of 3 full-time employees. Moving to economic development, which is head by Jennifer Hackman. You're familiar with the work that she does. She's heads up the economic development department, and same with her department. There is some administrative costs that have been shared, so you may see some changes there, which hadn't been in previous years. Her position is now under community development, where in previous years it had not been. There are no proposed changes with staffing levels as it remains at 1. The GIS department, led by Sam Jenkins, really has built the GIS for Pullman really from the ground up. As you may not be aware of, the Whitman County Assessor does not provide GIS services, which really is the only assessor, the only county assessor in the state that does not provide that. So when we hired Sam, it's about 2 years ago now, he really has done a phenomenal job. And really, when you look into his work, it really has created a situation where we didn't know what we had until we started building it. So if you look at the bottom of this screen, you can see that in 2024, there is a new position, the only one in community development, which will be a GIS analyst. So that'll help support Sam and the wonderful work that he's been doing. So you may see that reflected as you go across the chart there, and you notice that the salaries do increase, especially when you get from 23 to 24 with that new position. Protective inspections, which is more commonly known as the building inspectors. It's led by Jeremy Moore, who is the building official, and there are 4 building inspectors under him, as you can see in the bottom. There are no changes really, except for some of the costs, as I said, for administrative staff has been shared. As you can see, the change from 23 to 24 is just less than 1%. So it's pretty consistent across the board. That covers all the divisions in the Community Development Department. Are there any questions I can ask or answer of the council?
Any questions? And Francis?
Yes, on the protective inspections, I know from the Chamber Economic Development Committee, past years, we've had different issues with state inspectors and have talked about, is there value in taking on more of the role of the inspections from the state inspector side. Have you, and do you see any need in that way as we look at this protective inspections and the building inspection piece?
By state inspectors, are you referring to Labor and Industries?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they do some of the electrical and some of the other special inspections. I would not see any need to take those over as they do that statewide. I did fail to mention that the building inspectors do cover the WSU campus as well. Okay. So their community really is all of Pullman rather than just the privately owned portions.
My question was more along the lines we've had concerns from businesses because of the delay in getting inspections from the state side, not from the city side. And is that something that, as we're moving forward, is this something that we want to eventually build in so that we're able to do that in order to provide more timely inspections for the community? Yeah,
that was something that we could definitely look into. With current staffing levels, that might be a challenge, but nevertheless, if it creates delays on the state inspection side and slows the progress of Pullman, I think that that's something that would definitely take a closer look into.
Yeah, and I'm not seeing it for this budget, but as we move forward, is that something that, it'd be good to keep an eye on that to see if we're hearing more and more complaints from businesses related to that, and whether that's something that'd be value for us to program in for future budget cycles.
Yeah, I don't know if we could take all of those responsibilities from the state, but perhaps we could take some.
It was primarily electrical inspection was
Yeah.
the main cause, and I have since talked to several of the contractors here, and things have smoothed out considerably. And I've also talked to the instructor of those electrical inspectors, because he lives out in Colton, and they've got definitely a customer orientation now that they did not have before. So I think they've made significant progress in that regard. But that's something we can at least keep on our back burner if we ever need it. Nathan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. RJ, I just wanted to recognize, you stepped into this role, and community development was not really something the planner we had, but you've done so much more than that. And just want to recognize what you're doing. As I'm looking through all the goals for, your department, it's a lot. And you've balanced and been open to critiques, questions. You do the research, so appreciate your leadership and going above and beyond. So, thank you.
Eileen?
Yeah, and I'd like to follow up with that as saying that, as you said, Sam pretty much built the GIS from scratch, and Jen Hackman pretty much built her department from her desk as well, from scratch. Jennifer wears more hats than a lot of people might think, and I think she's doing a terrific job after we didn't give her much guidance to get started. We just sort of created the position and dropped her into it, and I think she's done an amazing job of building that from scratch, and we'll be looking to maybe cross our fingers and maybe expand those efforts and get her some more assistance there as well. So yeah, these are amazing changes, really, really moving us forward. Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you, Eileen, for mentioning that, and also the fact that she starts economic development, and we have a pandemic. And she moved really quick to try and help businesses stay afloat and really help moving that information out as far as getting grants, working with the chamber, working with the state, and everything else. And then, after we get through that, now she's doing the other part of economic development. So, made some great strides. Okay, no other questions? Thank you, RJ. Now comes Public Works, and our Public Works Director is Sean Colts. We'll start with arterial streets on page 116. As you're following along in your program, and he brings about, only 3 binders. So that's, yeah.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. There are 7 funds that cover the Public Works projects and work. I'll talk about each of those individually, and then I'll leave time for questions at the end of each fund. I also have a number of our Public Works staff here to help support with questions as well. So, as Mayor said, we'll start with the Arterial Streets Fund. And the Arterial Streets Fund primarily consists of capital improvements program projects. The projects that are in this budget include Project Downtown Pullman, of course, supported by ARPA funding. Our arterial streets resurfacing project supported by federal funding. Our Complete Streets Improvements project, and this was also grant supported, which we were pretty excited to get this grant. This is the first time that we've had this grant to support this work. So this is an opportunity to really improve our bike and pedestrian facilities. Our Bishop Boulevard resurfacing project, as you know, we've submitted a grant application to TIB for this work. We're crossing our fingers that we'll get this one. If we do not get that grant, we'll not be able to move that project forward, but we're waiting to hear from that. So we're optimistic at this point. And then lastly, the airport road improvements design work. Again, we got a new grant that we've not had before, the RAISE grant application for a little bit over $1 million. So I'll go through those in detail quickly. So the revenues that are coming from the ARPA funding are about $9 million. Of course, we already have this. We've received this in 2022, so that's not something that's coming in the future. So you'll The revenues versus the expenditures will look a little imbalanced because of that, because we've already received these funds and they're ready to be used. The $1 million raise grant, that's going to fully fund the airport road design work. We don't have any local match associated with that grant. We've got about $1.6 million in federal aid funds. That money will go towards our arterial streets resurfacing program on Merman Drive as well as Westwood Drive. So that project is under design now. We're looking to build that in 2023. And then again, our Complete Streets grant, which is a total revenue of $750,000, and then we bring $130,000 in local funds to match on that grant. So a lot of grant funds in this particular fund, and it's pretty exciting. It's a lot of work for our staff, but it's also pretty exciting work. Our local revenue sources for grant match include primarily $100,000 per year from our transit system, which we use to basically offset the impact of our transit buses on our street system. And then we get a $200,000 per year input from the fuel tax. So all in all, between grant and federal revenues, we're covering almost all of $12 million with those grant and federal funds. So a lot of great funding coming to the city for our projects. Costs in this fund primarily consist of construction and professional design services, although I will say that our city engineering staff are designing 3 of the 5 projects that we have in this fund. So we're keeping our engineering staff pretty busy with this one. And I'll stop there and pause and open it up for questions on the Arterial Streets Fund.
Apparently no questions, but a lot of congratulations on the staff for all the grant work they've been doing.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
They've done a great job. So I'll move on to the Streets Fund. And this primarily consists of maintenance and operation of our city streets and bridge systems, so pavement maintenance, snow and ice control, sidewalk rehabilitation, all of our street markings. We mark 115,000 feet of painting every year. All of our signage that we maintain, we generally replace about 150 signs per year. And then, of course, we've got 21 signals that we maintain, make sure that those are functioning properly, and then our 2 new roundabouts in the system that we're starting to maintain. The revenues for the street fund primarily come from 4 sources: utility taxes, which, of course, our utilities also pay into those. The real estate excise tax, gas tax, and state and federal grants. Revenues from these four sources have remained relatively flat over the last 5 years, and so that's really made this fund pretty challenged in terms of trying to keep pace with our expenditures and the inflation associated with that. So you'll see that reflected in this particular budget. The majority of the expenditures in the budget that's in front of you are salaries and wages and benefits, as well as supplies such as de-icer and fuel. But again, due to those inflationary cost pressures, what we've essentially had to do in this fund is pull almost all of the capital projects out of our streets fund. We're still doing all that work on the arterial streets side, but when it comes to more of the local streets, that's where we're seeing the real impact from limited revenues in this fund. So some of the projects that we removed that were originally in our capital planning were the Accelerated Streets project that we have planned in 2024. Mountain View Garden City project in 2023. We've actually got that one designed. It's ready to go, but just don't have the funds there to get that one done. A sidewalk infill project in 2023. Generally, we budgeted about $70,000 per year for sidewalk infill, but we just don't have the funds to do that in this budget. And then a couple of equipment items that we pulled out as well. Of course, this is pending the Transportation Benefit District discussion, and then we've had a few conversations about that, and I know that's coming up as well. So more to follow on the revenue side. Streets fund expenditures, a couple of capital projects that we have retained in this budget. One is our sidewalk repairs budget. We've annually had about $80,000 per year scheduled for sidewalk maintenance projects, so we're keeping that in this budget. And then we also had a grant match for a project with WSU to improve Orchard Drive and Valley Road shared use path. And that's a match from the city of $125,000, and WSU is providing quite a bit of funding in addition to some state funding to get that project done. So that's well in the works, but that is still reflected in this budget. And with that, I'll pause for questions on the street fund.
Eileen?
We know this budget is in a pinch, like a lot of budgets are. But I want to reassure the public, and I see Art sitting out here, that snow removal will continue to be maintained at the excellent level that, well, never perfect, of course. But, and we'll be sticking with that printed on-paper snow management plan. There will be no cuts in that we anticipate at this time. Thank you.
Okay.
So I will move on to the utilities fund, and this consists of maintenance and operation of our city water and sewer facilities. We deliver approximately 1 billion gallons of potable water annually with this fund. We treat about 800 million gallons of wastewater annually before that wastewater is discharged to the South Fork of the Palouse River. We provide our potable water and sanitary services to approximately 5,700 water customers in our system. And then with all of that included, we comply with the Washington Department of Ecology and EPA regulations. So our revenue sources are from a handful of sources. One, of course, our water and sewer bills pay for these utility services. The revenues associated with that are estimated at a little over $13 million in 2023. We do get state, federal, and local grants and loan programs that we have access to. One of those, we've applied for a Water Smart grant to help fund our advanced metering infrastructure system. I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. And we are waiting on the results of that Water Smart grant. So we're probably going to hear in January. So I'm crossing my fingers because that would basically cut the time in half to get that project done. On the expenditure side, the majority of the expenditures really are capital expenditures, and those are primarily reflected in transfers to projects in our utility capital projects fund. So I'll get into that in a little bit more detail when we get into the utility capital projects fund. The utility funds also pay our bond and loan debt service, so we've got a few projects that we're still paying off debt on. Of course, our salaries and wages, benefits, and our consumables such as the power bills and chemicals are a big part of this fund as well. So on the utilities fund side, of course, there's going to be more. I'll jump into the capital side of this a little bit, but I want to pause here and pause for questions.
Francis?
Yes, thank you. Two questions. One, you said we treat a million gallons and then the 800 million. I mean, Mike, I think we need to reverse the numbers in the first page.
You're correct.
Okay. So
Yep.
that's just,
I'm sorry, which page?
so on page 122, the first paragraph, the 800 should be the 1,000 million, and then the 1,000 million should be the 800 million. So that just needs to be a correction in the document.
Okay, I'll work with the author on that.
Okay. And then I'm assuming when we look at the budget on 126, where we have the total budget is into a negative, that's because that's the ARPA funds?
That's correct, and that's a
Okay.
great question. And so what you'll see in the utility fund often is that you'll see some years where you have pretty high expenditures, and that's largely because of the capital projects that are happening. And then other years you reduce the number of capital projects you're doing in that year, and then you have lower expenditures.
So we have the negative, great.
So you're
Thank
trying
you.
to balance that over multiple years. Yeah. Okay. Switching to our utility capital projects fund, this consists mostly of our major capital projects in water, sewer, and the wastewater treatment facility utilities. These projects typically are multi-year projects with design and construction over multiple budget cycles. The highlights in this particular fund are Water Tank 12. That's a project that we had hoped to construct actually this past summer. We had the design done, we were ready to pull the trigger, but then when we bid it, the bids came in about double what the original estimates were. So we had to put this one on pause and then rebalance our capital planning to accommodate that. So we're targeting the construction of that tank next summer. Design of the water main extension to the airport terminal. So we've got that included, and that's another project that our engineering team will be designing in-house. Design of the wastewater treatment plant built filter press. So we've got some old equipment at our wastewater treatment plant that is frankly from the 50s, and we can't even get spare parts for it anymore. So it's one that needs to be replaced. Project downtown Pullman, of course, we've got all of our utilities in that project that we need to replace at the same time we do our major project. We've got a lot of old pipes buried under Main Street, and we want to make sure we get those pipes replaced while we're doing this project, so we don't end up with the main break or something like that, a few years down the road, and then have to replace those utilities after we've already built this brand new pavement. So it's the right time to replace those utilities, and when we've got everything torn up, and so we keep our disruption to a minimum. And then our advanced metering infrastructure, we're again pretty excited about this project. This is where we're waiting to hear on the Water Smart grant application. This is an opportunity to advance our water conservation efforts, give our water customers a real tool to track their water use in real time. So we're excited about this. In fact, I've got my engineering team working on this, and we're targeting a bid date in December to get our first phase off the ground. So we're going to be bringing that to you in December, and we're pushing pretty hard on this one. We're ready to get that first phase off the ground. On the revenue side, the funds for this utility capital projects fund are primarily from the utility fund. The revenues do in some cases include grant sources. A lot of the infrastructure bill monies, at least on the water and sewer side, are coming through the SRF loan program. So, there are more loan options out there, but the grants are not quite as flush as, say, transit or from the street side. So it's a little bit more challenging to get grants in this particular area. Some of our major expenditures, of course, the capital projects they already noted, but one thing I will point out is our asset management system implementation. So we're looking at, and we've actually been looking with our public works team for quite a while now at what asset management system we would like to move forward, and we've pinned that down. It's a program called CityWorks. It's used pretty heavily throughout the country. I've been talking with Mike Urban on this one, and when we want to start an implementation process on that, because it's a pretty heavy lift from an implementation standpoint. And we want to get the Munis system off the ground so that we can have that there, and then we can integrate with that. So we're looking probably middle of next year to start that implementation process. But what that will do is it will give us a lot of data to make asset management decisions. So, basically, if you look at your rules of thumb when it comes to asset management, you want 80% of your work to be focused on preventative maintenance, right? And then, you leave about a 20% room in there so that you can respond to that maintenance that you just can't predict. And so that's our goal, is to get to that point, and this asset management program will get us to that point. But it takes a lift to get there. It's a lot of data, and we've got to get buy-in from all the staff and get the system implemented. So that's a big project for us that'll be coming up in the next couple of years. Close out of our 2022 construction projects. So we just have a few projects that we're on the tail end of. One is our maintenance and operation facility grading expansion. That work just went on a winter shutdown. They'll come back once we get through the winter when they can actually work the soils and finish up that project. Our wastewater treatment plant, we're just finishing up some work on a solids handling system there. And that's just taking time because of the delivery times on equipment. So we're getting there, but we'll have to cross over into 2023 to get those projects done. And with that, I'll pause for questions on the Utilities Capital Projects Fund.
Okay, we'll go to Nathan, then Eileen.
So I gotta say, I like the diagrams. I get jazzed about that. And congratulations with the water monitoring. I was down talking to Art and some of the people, because when my bill came in, I was like kind of surprised. I usually keep it pretty low, so I'm pretty excited about that. One question I did have, and it may be a little off of the budget topic, but it'll take real quick. At the ward meetings, there was some discussion about parks at some of the water towers, and especially one of them was the new water tower going in. Is this something that you can find viable as long as there's a fence around the water tower?
Yeah, so the only thing that we would have to make sure we do would be to, provide the security around the water facilities, and that's a national regulation essentially that we provide that. So as long as we've got that fencing around the tower and the control systems associated with it, if we've got property then outside of that, then we can work with that property. Whether that's a trail around a tank or whether there's enough space for a park. I would say Lawson Gardens is actually a pretty good example of that, where you've got water facilities and immediately right next to it, you've got a park. So it depends on how much land you have. You kind of get down to the details of that. And I don't know off the top of my head if we would have the land up there to, build a park out there or not. Right now, it's just, dirt road up there. It's something that, as developers come in, we could also ask, hey, give us the ground so that we can wrap a path around the tank, for example. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
Great, I appreciate that. Citywide mountain bike trail, right?
Oh yeah, I'm all
There
in
we
for that.
Eileen.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. And we've had some of the blogs have been making comment upon the water main breaks. And so I recalled that Nathan had asked about water main breaks several years ago, and because it seemed like we'd had quite a few. And that always kind of gets the public's attention. So Art and Kara and others were kind enough to dig up the data that was gathered. This is a huge, I think it's 40 pages document of this has been studied. And we know where we're at with that. If people are curious, maybe we can send this out and to people who, this is an exhaustive and amazing study that was done. We know where our pipes are, what our pipes are doing, their age, their capacities, their likelihood of having problems, and that gives us, it's that data management piece that you were talking about. This lets us know where we are on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of water breaks. We're on about a 7 or an 8 on the good side. We just don't have the problems that we've had in other communities because we know what we're doing, and part of this study was very helpful in that. When things happen, it's rather dramatic, but we're good on this, and we're taking care of our water. And you know me, I'm one of those every drop people. We know. So to reassure the public, we have the data in hand. The studies have been done, and thank Nathan for those many years ago that he kind of brought this onto our radar, and this was an excellent study that we've done. We have the data, and we're going to use it. Thanks, you guys, all of you.
Yeah, and I would add.
We have great data, and sometimes you don't anticipate a construction truck with jacks in the location where a particular water main broke.
Those are those known unknowns.
Yes, right. So,
Yeah.
okay.
So, and I would add to that a little bit and say that, we reflected in this budget, we've got about $500,000 a year that we dedicate towards water main replacements. And if you look at our main breaks compared to the data that's coming from Washington, Idaho, and Oregon, for the equivalent amount of lineal foot that we have this year about 12 breaks. For the last 5 years, we've had about 7 to 12 breaks per year. But the average in those 3 states has been about 15 per year for that same amount of lineal footage. So we're actually ahead of the average. We're doing good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Continue on.
Okay. The Stormwater Fund, this primarily consists of implementation of the Stormwater Management Program and conforming with the city's NPDS Phase 2 municipal stormwater permit. And there are quite a few elements of this permit, and we track on all of these elements as part of this program. And primarily, the goal of this program is to improve water quality in our streams, as well as to protect from a flood management standpoint what happens with our streams. And essentially, what we're doing with this fund is we're maintaining and improving our stormwater infrastructure within our funding limits. This is another fund that's somewhat challenged, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But we're doing things like cleaning our storm sewer lines with this fund, our stormwater inlets, removing some of the vegetation that grows in our detention ponds. We're doing street sweeping with this fund. Some of the other things that we're doing, we're increasing public awareness of stormwater issues. We don't want to be dumping oil down the drain, for example, that ends up in a receiving stream. But again, meeting regulatory permit requirements is a primary driver of this particular fund. So everything that we do, it's kind of reverse engineered. We look at the permit limits, and then we take the steps that we need to take in order to meet those permit limits. From a revenues side, the revenues are coming from stormwater utility charges. We do have a grant that we're using right now to design a decant facility, so that's in hand. We've applied for a construction grant for that same facility, so we're optimistic about that one. It's likely time frame to be constructed in the fall in 2023, possibly in 2024. But we'll need to get that grant in order to get that facility constructed. Majority of our expenditures are really in salaries, wages, and benefits. We've got maintenance and professional services that we pay out of this fund. So for example, we have a contractor that will do the lawn mowing and remove some of the vegetation from stormwater detention facilities that you'll see out along the subdivisions. There are a number of interfunds, of course, that play into the stormwater fund like any other fund, but it's just a larger percentage of this fund than most others. The capital expenditures really are limited in this fund to the comprehensive stormwater management plan. Again, and that's just a reality of this particular fund where it's at today. So, of course, you all know we recently raised the rate here, but that was the first rate increase we've done since 2011. So we're a little bit behind in this fund. And part of that too, as we looked at the revenues compared to the expenditures, and Mike had alluded to this last week, is that there was $500,000 for stormwater improvements at the airport terminal that we're not designating out of the stormwater fund, that we're designating from a different fund. We thought about trying to source that from this fund, but we just couldn't do that lift. So that's something that we looked at pretty hard when we were looking at expenditures in this fund. And with that, I'll pause for questions on the stormwater fund.
Any questions on this? When you mention an outside contractor that takes care of some of the stormwater detention facilities, that's put out for bid, what, on every 2-year basis, every 3-year bid, or what?
Do you remember?
Since we have a number of independent contractors around, it's more of a curiosity question.
Yeah, and Clayton confirmed it was 1 year that we bid that out every year.
Okay.
Typically, we've only had one bid on that one. It just hasn't been the interest in that particular work.
I know all of the contractors that I talk to have a heck of a problem right now just trying to find workers.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of their biggest issues. Yeah. We've actually heard that with, both Mike and I have been getting some communications from public that one had to be going on sabbatical, and he was trying to contact somebody for doing snowplow at their house or their sidewalks when they were gone, and some of the normal companies couldn't even do it because they didn't have enough personnel. So,
Yeah.
okay. Thank you.
The next fund is the Transit Fund. The Transit Fund supports the city's transit system, which, at full pace, after full recovery from the pandemic, we would expect to have about 1.4 million annual fixed route passengers on the buses and about 20,000 annual dial-a-ride users. One of the items that I wanted to point out in this fund, and it's reflected in the expenditures, is that we would like to expand service to the airport. This is something that we've applied for a grant with the FTA and the state that allows us to expand our service area, and that seemed like the best natural expansion of the system. And one of the things that we've also done with our recent grant applications is apply for 2 electric buses that are a little bit shorter because we don't have demand to load a full 35-foot bus to get out the airport, but a smaller bus, it's perfectly sized. So that allows us to also use some smaller buses in some areas that maybe don't quite need those larger buses. So we're excited to get after that. And then combined with airport road project that we're going to start designing, then we can really design those transit pullouts and make a great facility. So we're excited about this one. Our contract with WSU to support the cost of providing the service to the students. The WSU contract provides about 50% of the revenues for our transit system. We also have significant grants from WashDOT and the FTA, and that generally provides roughly a quarter of our funding for this system. We also get revenues from the local utility tax, Spokane Falls Community College, as well as fare costs and pass and token sales. The transit fund expenditures primarily consist of regular salaries and benefits, new bus purchases, operating expenses such as fuel, as well as repair and maintenance on those buses. And with that, I will pause for questions.
Francis?
Just as a heads up, I was in a meeting last week with a representative from GPSA, and GPSA is very frustrated with the transit they're receiving, not from the city side, but they're frustrated because their funds are pooled together with WSU, and WSU is coming together with what they want. And so they're actually trying to negotiate in order to pull their funds out of WSU's pooled funds in order to negotiate directly with the city related to the specific needs that the graduate students have. So just to be aware, there's some dynamics that are going on related to those funds that may or may not change, but so that you're aware.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, the Graduate Student Professional Association, they get about an equal vote with the undergraduate student body. So that's a big move.
Yeah, they actually last week did a vote of no confidence to the WSU administration because of how WSU administration is providing the transit portion for them. And a lot of it had to do with the Thursday night game day and what happened during that side, not from the city side, but from WSU side. So I just want you to know they're not upset with our transit system. They're just frustrated with the service that was negotiated by pooling the funds all together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Lastly, the Equipment Rental Division Fund. This supports the city's fleet of vehicles, which is roughly 200 vehicles in the city. So it's procurement and maintenance of those 200 vehicles. The revenues include essentially funds from other city departments that use the services through internal service funds. So the revenues total, about 3.7 million estimated in 2023 and about 3.5 in 2024. The majority of the expenditures total in 2023 are from salaries, wages, benefits, maintenance of vehicles, and then vehicle purchases. And the expenditures, again, this is a fund where you can see expenditures bump up one year and then come back down another year as you buy things like a bus or you buy a fire truck. They're fairly costly, and so you can see big bumps from year to year. And with that, we'll take questions on the ERD fund.
Any questions on this? Okay.
I wanted to talk briefly about summarized staffing changes in public works. So there are essentially 4 staffing changes that are reflected in this draft budget. And one is a new FTE, which would be an M&O worker, to implement a new water distribution system valve exercising program. So we've talked about this a little bit in the past, where we've really kind of struggled to be able to isolate when we get a water main break. You know, we have to go farther and farther out and then basically shut off a larger area in order to isolate a main so that we can work on it. So and that, you know, becomes particularly challenging when you're talking about isolating mains around school facilities, around hospitals, where you really don't want to cut off water supply to those types of facilities. So, you know, this exercising program basically would allow us to work through the entire system, exercise every valve once every 4 years. But what we would also do would exercise the valves around our critical facilities, again, our hospitals, our schools, those types of facilities every year. So we'd really focus in on those. But this one FTE basically allows us to implement that program. And, you know, it's something where we wouldn't just assign one worker just to do all of this. You'd, you know, probably get bored just turning valves all day long, 24/7. But that's something that we would spread out amongst the entire team. The second request in the budget is for a new instrument and control technician. So right now we've got one instrument and control technician that literally programs all of the control systems for all of our water facilities, our wastewater treatment plant, our sewage pump stations. You know, these are the systems that automate all of those functions. And so, you know, if you can imagine being the one person responsible for this, whenever any of those systems goes down, that there's one person to respond to it. And then there's also a redundancy issue there. If our one instrument and control person were to leave or get hit by a bus or, you know, something along those lines, we'd really be in trouble. We don't have any redundancy there. So this is something where we'd like to get some additional capacity built into our system and redundancy. And as you can imagine, this is a critical function for us. We'd like to, on our third item here, we'd like to convert 9 seasonal staff to 1 FTE, maintenance and operations worker. So right now we've got, I believe it's 13 seasonal staff and 12 seasonal staff in M&O. And what we've found the last couple of years especially is that we really haven't been able to find the workers to fill all those seasonal positions. So it's been a challenge to fill those, and then subsequently we haven't been able to get all the work done that we'd like to get done with those seasonal workers. And then there's another element of that, in that our maintenance and operations leadership is having to train those staff every year, and then you train them for 3 months, and then of course, you know, they move on. And that becomes particularly challenging when you're talking about safety situations like having somebody work on Grand or on Main where there's a lot of traffic. So we'd like to cut back a little bit on the seasonal staff for those reasons. This is a budget neutral request. We'd still have the same capacity to do all those functions with that 1 FTE, but just given kind of the nature of what we've been dealing with, we'd like to convert those seasonal workers. The final request that's reflected in these public works budgets is a reclass of our engineering technician to a city surveyor title, and basically we would be adding that workload to our engineering technician currently. So, you know, right now we really have a need for somebody that can review our plat documents that come through when we get a final plat. For example, we want to make sure that all of the boundaries and all the lot lines are set appropriately so that we don't have a problem down the road where a landowner comes back and says, wow, my property line is actually 10 foot off of where it should be. And so just to have that check, and you'd be surprised at how often there's an issue with just a simple boundary line. And then there are other reasons to do this too. One is so that we can do some of our own in-house surveying services. So we do a lot of our own engineering work in-house, but our engineers aren't surveyors at the same time. So to get that capacity where we're doing our own survey work in-house, we can save a lot on external professional services costs. And then, another example, we've had a number of questions come up on, where are city boundaries on certain properties and how does that impact a private property owner? So we'd be able to do that type of research in-house, whereas right now, we send that work out to a consultant to do. So I think there's a lot of potential gain here from a budget standpoint in terms of not spending that money on professional services. And any questions on staffing changes?
Francis?
And just for clarification, we currently don't have a city surveyor, so this is a new position that, new duties that are going to be covered for things that currently we have to go out of house, and now we'll be able to do these in-house.
Yeah, and it's not I wouldn't call it a fully new position because we're essentially converting the engineering technician position to this
We're
one.
upgrading a position, maybe,
Yeah.
maybe that's it. But I'm just saying with these services, these are we're able to do more services in-house than have to go out of house.
That's
And
correct.
I like going this direction.
Yep, yep.
I thought Edward had some additional certification before he came on board with that. Maybe I'm,
Yeah, and Edward is a licensed surveyor, and
Right,
so
okay.
that we've got an opportunity here, to really be able to use his expertise in a much better way. Because right now, I can't ask him to put his stamp, for example, on a survey. I can't ask him to review a plat document and say, yeah, as a surveyor, I bless this thing. And with this change, I would be able to ask him to do that.
Okay.
And so he's got that licensure, so we'd be there, right there to do that work.
Eileen?
Yeah, on page 50, we have a brief discussion about Parks and Facilities Maintenance Supervisor, professional. This, of course, as many of you know, parks is a pet issue of mine, and I would like to see a parks person, professional, hired who is really our champion, who is really the parks champion, and who has a little more autonomy maybe than working with the current structure, that this is a parks person, that we're not going to be pulling this person off to, direct traffic on the 4th of July or whatever. And so this is a real true professional. You've heard me talk about this a lot. I think one of the silver linings of COVID is that we've learned to value our open spaces far more than we maybe did before. What has been done in the parks over the last year is truly phenomenal. There's been a lot of improvement. I'm not saying that there hasn't been. But I would like to see someone who is absolutely the champion of our parks as a professional, gets up every day breathing fire for our parks, and is not bound by some of the constraints that I see, sort of the implicit bias towards rec that we often see. I'd like to see, almost a Title IX type of approach to parks to separate it from rec, and to value those open spaces. I don't care for the term passive recreation. I think it's pejorative. I think there's a lot more that goes on in a person's mind and soul in a park situation that is not tied to sports or that sort of thing, that are often competitive and judgmental, in my view. We cannot undervalue our parks. We've got to overvalue our parks, if anything, and I would like to see that person have a lot more autonomy in the future. And the other one I'm going to mention, and if Mike waves me off, that's fine too, is there's been some, well, the only word for it really is sort of scuttlebutt about bringing our city attorney in-house. And I know that's a huge budget consideration, but I keep hearing things about how some of the issues that are important to council and important to our residents are kind of stuck in traffic on the city attorney's desk. And if there's some way we can improve that, get a full-time city attorney, we're big kids now, and I think we, like a real grown-up family, you need a family attorney, and we need a family attorney that represents the wishes of the council and our residents and moves projects forward. I think you know the ones I'm talking about. And yeah, I know that's a big thing, and it's not mentioned in here anywhere, but let's start the budget amendment process with one of those moves.
All right. Thank you for those comments. And with that, nothing else? Thank you very much, Sean. We're now moved to the backed by popular demand, Civic Improvement Fund. When we talked about it a week ago, Mike gave about 4 different kinds of options that we could deal with this one particular issue. And a couple people mentioned that they were leaning towards a continuation of the current contract. But with that, we'll turn it back to Mike Urban, our city administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, council. Again, we're on page 140, the Civic Improvement Fund, number 120. I don't really want to belabor anything that I may have presented last week, if it's the council's wish to just dive into the professional services tours and promotion contract. Would you like a rehash of this fund from the beginning? I'm getting a lot of yeses. Okay. So very quickly, this fund, the revenues from this fund are largely created through the lodging tax for hotel stays. There's, and private campgrounds, RV parks, similar facilities. There is some investment income as well from the dollars that are sitting in reserves, but primarily the bulk of the revenues are coming in through lodging tax. These dollars are then turned around and expended out based on what the lodging tax rules are on the state. So it's promoting tourism, promoting people to come to Pullman. During COVID, we, 2 years ago in July, and not knowing what we were going into, we did a very fiscally responsible, almost conservative budget on this particular item. But now, as we see a lot of the pandemic restrictions being lifted, we're returning more towards a different view that people are coming to Pullman to not only for game days, but for other types of items. So the revenues have been increased for 23 to $605,000, and for 2024, $656,425. So a total over this 2-year budget of $1,261,425. Now, expenditure-wise, there's no staff associated with this particular fund. Everything is either looped into essentially 5 different expenditures that are all aggregated on the other expenses line. So what you see on page 141 is other operating expenses. I'm going to skip the first one because that's what we'll come back to. But when we talked about this during the last budget, we've created a couple new BARS line items specifically for events. So there's a line item for the 4th of July, community event for the Lentil Festival. There's a community event line item too for city reimbursement. So this is an opportunity when we send staff to prepare for these events to staff the events. When we do that, those salaries and wages get reimbursed back into their proper fund for the work they were doing for the 120 fund. For lack of a better term, it's kind of like an interfund. And then the last one is external grants, and this is when groups come to the Lodging Tax Committee and say, we would like some advertising dollars to bring this event to Pullman. So there is that external grant piece. And as you can see, those 4 items are budgeted for 2023. And in 2024, I certainly want to point out the external grants are quite a bit higher because, as Sean Coates mentioned earlier, the airport piece where council's committed the $2 million to. And when we came to council earlier in the spring and discussed this, originally the idea is $1.5 million out of this fund and $500,000 out of the stormwater fund. But as we watch these funds develop over the year, stormwater fund is having some pain points, while the collections on lodging tax have been well ahead of projection. And the lodging tax fund can afford to do this and fulfill its responsibilities, provided council does a couple, no, not even a couple, I'm sorry, just one small thing. So when I reported last week on reserves, there was approximately $2.5 million of reserves available. 250,000 of that has been designated for the airport air service grant for when we recruit another air service to the community for advertising and help supporting that. So that's kind of put off to the side there, held. There's another $700,000 being held still, and that's for the Lawson Garden House building, which originally was supposed to match the $700,000 from the bond to build a $1.4 million facility. Well, since we've taken a different direction and gone with parks equipment instead of the house, if council were to undesignate that $700,000 to be available in the unrestricted reserves, then we could certainly fulfill these obligations to all the parties and still maintain a healthy fund reserve considering the revenues that are coming in. Short of a professional services agreement for tourism promotion, Council, under the advisement of staff and the Lodging Tax Committee, did reject the one bid for tourism promotion last week because it was at $1.9 million, which was not sustainable from a revenue standpoint anyway. So that item now on the top line, professional services for tourism promotion, remains zero. It's something that we need to look at and come up with some solutions. And last week, I suggested 4 options. The first was to review the RFP packet, make some edits, repost for responses. Option 2, work with the current provider on a contract extension past the end date of this contract, 12/31 of 2022. Option 3, have staff research bringing the activity in-house and return to the City Council with that analysis. Option 4, something else from the mayor or the council that we haven't really considered at this point. Or option 5, some combination of options 1 through 4. And once this particular item is settled, at the end, whenever that process, whatever process that is, takes place, we would come back to the council with a proposal for acceptance and a budget amendment to increase that tourism number from 0 right now. Certainly wasn't what we expected when we sent out the RFP. We wanted to integrate the new studies that were done for strategic tourism as well as our marketing. I think there's a lot of room left for interpretation, but staff's really looking for some direction as to what to do with the tourism piece right now. And I think that's kind of it in a nutshell. I'd be happy to answer questions on that.
Okay, Francis?
Mike, with your options, is there another option since we only had one bid? Because you talked about either working with the current contract, but if we worked on the current contract, we couldn't add in anything new that was in the RFP that wasn't in the current contract, I'm assuming. That may not be correct. But is there also an option of, because they're the only bidder, to go back to them about working on what parts could we find a middle ground that's agreeable of funding-wise, but based on the RFP?
I believe so, and I think the other piece of that too is whatever comes out of that and the process that was changed late last year for this is it goes back through the lodging tax for their recommendation to the council.
Okay.
Nathan, do you want? Okay,
Yes.
Nathan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mike, I had somebody ask me, actually today, that with all these studies, isn't the city rather well prepared to be doing this in-house? And so I'm passing along that question to you.
Other than doing an analysis of what that would cost to bring it in-house and staff that, that's the unknown.
Okay.
So could we be? Yes. A little additional analysis on that to prove either we are or we aren't would be prudent.
Okay.
Other questions or comments? Eileen?
You know, we hesitate to just kind of keep shuffling this down the road, but do we have refresh my memory on our time frame on this? Do we need to make a decision within this budget process, and what's our ultimate time goal on that?
By all means, because the agencies have to get their contracts done. I mean, when we're talking events in August or July,
Right.
they got to get those contracts done now. Pat, did you want to speak to it since you're on that committee? Okay.
I think the contract, we extended the contract for 2022, correct?
We did a 6-month for the first part of '21 and another 6-month for the second half, and then a full year for 2022. So it happened in a couple steps.
Okay, so, I mean, time is moving on, and as Glenn said, you know, we only have so much latitude in terms of contracting for advertising and all of the things associated with the different events that would be handled under the purview of that contract. Every year, we seem to come to this, and I think that we're definitely doing a disservice to the agency that has been a good partner for us for, these many years. And I think it behooves us to try to come up with something to which we can make a good faith effort to show that we do truly want to work with that group. Now, I wasn't involved in the development of the RFP, so I don't know how it can be pared down to make it more feasible for both of us, both us in terms of, you know, passing on the funds necessary, and for the agency to be able to realistically do what we want. And, you know, I know this was very illustrative of the kind of work that we're asking for, and this is what it's going to cost, but I feel like there's a little bit of room there for negotiation, even if that is to devise a new RFP with a little, I don't know, pared down, trimmed down expectations on our part. I agree what was presented was not feasible, but I don't want us to be in a position where we're just gonna, you know, cut it all off. And I don't think we are prepared as a city to take that responsibility on after the first of the year.
Sure, and one of the things I did not mention in today's discussion that I did mention last week is something that we saw in a lot of other RFPs was a budget, a cap. What can you do for X? Where this RFP, we felt, why bid against ourselves and see what type of work we can get? And since there was only the one, it was kind of more of the sky's the limit as opposed to what were we really looking at. So something to pare back would be adding, here's the budget, what can you do for that? As opposed to leaving it completely open-ended and to the interpretation of the bidder.
I, for one, would like to see something like that. I think that's certainly more realistic and gives us a little more feasibility in terms of what, you know, what we can be working with. As Eileen said, we keep kicking this can down the road, and pretty soon we're going to get to the end of the road, and then what are we going to do? But I kind of hate to just continue this on infinitum, so.
Go to Francis next, and then Nathan.
So, Mike, is there, as you look at the budgets and work through the budget, is there a number that you would feel comfortable with that you don't feel would draw down our reserves too far? And I guess what I was going to propose is it's really not realistic for us to bring this in-house by the start of January 1st. And so it's best for us to try to figure out a way to work with who we're currently working with. We do have, this is part of the tourism piece, and there is a strategic tourism work group. Is it something where if the council can come up with, this is the number that we would like to put into the budget, then the work group is tasked with working with the provider in order to come up with what's agreeable, and then that goes through the normal process of lodging tax and also the council for final approval.
I would recommend most of that.
Okay.
I would pause at giving it to the Strategic Tourism Work Group, specifically because the contractor is on that committee. And trying to negotiate with somebody that's putting the work together probably is not in the council's best interest. What I would recommend instead is asking the 2 members of the city council tasked to the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee to work with me on that particular task instead.
And I'd be acceptable for that if the council's in agreement.
Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Nathan?
So, Mike, given the scope of work that we did ask, it is, I mean, it's a lot that we had asked. I think it's important, my feeling at this time is to extend that contract, at least for right now. But I also feel that a hybrid of looking at analyzing how we can do it in-house, not saying January 1st. I mean, that's right around the corner. Analyzing how we can do it. We've got a lot of smart people on board, excited individuals. We've got a lot of energy in this city, and a lot of people who I think would help. I would also say something, a bit of a hybridization. I understand what, Pat has said. We do disservice if it's just cut off completely. So some sort of hybrid model, if we can come up with that. Not sure that right now, I'm just spitballing, but being able to look at what we can do in-house and work with the contractor with. I'm not saying now, I'm saying a little bit down the line and extending the contract for right now. But we've got to kind of take this ball. I think previous council members had expressed, and their previous council members, but they had expressed some concerns about, focus on Pullman. And I think there's some areas that the city, we can take up on that. So that's my opinion.
Eileen?
Yeah, I've heard a lot of things that I like here. So at the risk of kind of using a phrase, can we restate the motion? Where sort of are we? Because I think we're there. We just need to put it in 25 words or less.
My understanding of what I'm hearing is that I should go back with the assistance of Pat and Becky, work with the current provider to talk about extending the contract while also tasking out staff to come up with what would it take to bring it in-house and bring that analysis back. That's kind of the feel that I'm getting, and if I missed something, I'm looking for that redirection.
I'm hearing that, but not an urgency on the in-house yet, because we have a lot of other things that are on the agenda that's pretty heavy right now. Maybe in the first of the year, they can start looking at that. But right now, we need to address the current contractor and get this contract done as quickly as possible so they can make their orders and they can get things planned out for the new year and figure out if they need to hire somebody. But trying to do a study at the same time doesn't work, not for a while yet.
Well, I think we were saying that with extending.
Yeah, I
we need to
apologize
extend right now,
if that
so,
was the way it was taken. I was not assuming that,
No, I
so.
understood what you were saying, extending the current and then looking into, it's a dual approach.
Right.
So,
But I just want to make sure the timetable with all the things we have on our agenda. Becky?
Yeah, definitely extending the current contract so we can get these things done. But my view would be more one of two things, either reissuing the RFP with some more specifics, or working with the current provider of what is possible. I'm actually kind of torn between the two. I'm not entirely sure what, but the study for the in-house, to me, it seems like that we have enough that's a huge shift, and we have a provider who's done incredible 4th of Julys and incredible Lenten festivals, and I think can serve the community with some of the more innovative things that I just think that needs to be worked out. That's my take.
Okay. So I'm hearing extending and working with the group and working with the current provider to get this contract extended as quickly as possible and back on the council agenda for a motion. Is that basically it? Okay?
Okay.
All right.
So I just kind of have a question. So would we be able to have that as an agenda item next week?
No.
Okay.
We have to have the agenda put to bed by Wednesday. This is one of those things that I'm talking about when you have back-to-back meetings. We don't have the capacity to turn something around that fast
Okay.
from time to time, and this is one of those times due to some staffing issues that I'm having in my department.
So it'd be after Thanksgiving then, realistically, so the first meeting that we'd have after the holiday?
It would make a lot of sense to put it on the 29th, since that's the evening of the adoption of the budget scheduled.
Okay.
And then we certainly have the meeting on the 13th if we don't hit that goal. But it all depends too on how fast we can mobilize as a group and how well that's received by the current provider and how fast they can talk to their board and get back to us. I'm hoping they would fast track it like we're trying to, but I can't make those types of promises.
Okay. Megan?
So I just need some clarification. So what we're voting on is to extend the contract. At the same time, are we looking at going back to the current provider and looking for some kind of cap and seeing what they can do? And then we're doing a in-house analysis, not urgent. Is that right? Do I have it right?
I didn't expect a vote. I think I've gotten the direction
Okay,
to come back with some of these pieces, exactly what you've been
Okay.
talking about.
great.
We're all in agreement with that.
Understood?
You've got the
Thank you.
direction.
Yeah, that's exactly what we need, and
Okay.
I'll be reaching out in the next 24 hours to get the ball rolling on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. This is time we open up for public comment. Seeing no one here from the public, other than department heads and people of expertise within our city, we'll move on from that. Consent agenda is next. Do I hear a motion to read the consent agenda by title only?
So moved. Second.
Any opposed? Okay, with that, Mike, are you ready to read, or?
Yep, it timed out and rebooted, ready to go.
Okay.
Council, tonight your consent agenda consists of item number 1, a motion to dispense of the reading of the minutes and special meeting of November 1st, 2022, and approve them as submitted. Item 2, a motion to approve disbursements for accounts payable checks numbered 108-100 through 108-156, totaling $736,250.40. Item number 3, a motion to approve disbursements for accounts payable checks numbered 108-292 through 108-324, totaling $275,576.10, and voiding check 106-571 to be replaced with check number 108-325, totaling $369.09. Item number 4, a motion to approve disbursements for accounts payable checks numbered 108-326 through 108-384, totaling $798,326.48. Item 5, slow down, Mike. A motion to approve disbursements for utility billing refund checks numbered 108-385 through 108-387, totaling $145.70. Item number 6, a motion to approve disbursements, accounts payable checks numbered 108-388 through 108-396, electronic transfers 83, 84, 927, and 929 through 932, payroll direct deposits numbered 80448 through 8099, totaling $943,413.51. Item number 7, a motion to approve disbursements for accounts payable checks number 108-397 through 108-398, totaling $9,001.20. And a motion to approve disbursements for accounts payable checks numbered 108-399 through 108-463, totaling $1,460,906.30.
The constable blank out for discussion. Seeing none, the consent agenda consists of items 1 through 8. Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, there is no regular agenda items. There is no new business that I know
New
of.
business, real
Pardon?
quick.
Yes?
New business.
One new business item. Okay?
It just bears repeating to remember to vote. That's all. Everybody vote.
I think that is something that we can all agree on, so please vote. If you haven't already, ballots got dropped off in the Johnson House from last week, I think it was. All right, other than that, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and second, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
You're calling me that.